The sirens went off while the child was still asleep in my arms, and my whole body went cold. I was sitting alone in the quiet med bay of the transfer station, holding a small alien girl named Vesh who had cried herself into sleep an hour earlier. Her mother, an ambassador from the Kelthan hive, had left her with me only for a short meeting. That meeting had turned into chaos. Now red lights spun across the walls, and a voice on the speakers said words that made my stomach drop. Unknown vessel approaching. Weapons hot. Queen Mother demands immediate access. I did not know what that meant, not fully, but I knew it was bad. Kelthans did not send their Queen Mother anywhere unless something had gone horribly wrong. And judging by the way the guards outside my door started shouting orders, something had. I stood up slowly, careful not to wake Vesh. She was small for her age, with soft blue skin and short antennae that twitched even in her sleep. Her fingers were curled tightly around a fold of my jacket, like she was afraid that if she let go, she would lose the only safe thing left in the room. The door slid open and a young officer named Callum rushed in, his face pale. "Nadia," he said, breathless, "you need to hand her over. Now, security wants the child moved to a locked chamber before the Queen Mother lands." "She just fell asleep," I said quietly. "If I hand her to a stranger right now, she's going to wake up screaming." "That's not the problem right now," Callum said, glancing over his shoulder. "The problem is that half the fleet thinks we're holding her hostage. The ambassador went missing during the evacuation. Nobody knows where she is, and the Queen Mother is convinced humans took her granddaughter." My arms tightened around Vesh without meaning to. "We didn't take anyone. She was scared. I stayed with her because nobody else would." "I believe you," Callum said, "but belief isn't going to matter in about 4 minutes." He left to relay something to command, and I was alone again, standing in the middle of a room that suddenly felt too small and too bright. The sirens kept wailing. Every few seconds, the whole station shivered slightly, as if something enormous were moving nearby, and I understood then that the Queen Mother's ship was already docking. I thought about running. I thought about hiding in the supply closet at the back of the room, just until someone else could explain things, just until the situation calmed down. But Vesh shifted against my shoulder, murmured something in her sleep, and settled again, and I realized I could not do that. If I ran, if I hid, if I let go of her now, it would look exactly like guilt. And worse, it would mean waking a frightened child into a room full of armed strangers. So I stayed where I was. The doors at the far end of the corridor opened with a heavy mechanical groan, and I heard footsteps. Not human footsteps. Something heavier, more deliberate, each step landing with a low thud that I felt through the floor before I heard it. Voices shouted orders in Kelthan, sharp and urgent, and then, cutting through all of it, came a single word repeated over and over. I thought. Later I would learn it meant granddaughter. The med bay door slid open, and she stepped inside. The Queen Mother of the Kelthan hive was taller than any alien I had ever stood near, with a dark, armored exoskeleton that caught the light in sharp angles. Her eyes were large, black, and utterly still, fixed on me the moment she entered. Behind her, soldiers filled the corridor, weapons raised but not yet aimed, waiting for a signal. I did not move. I could not have moved even if I wanted to. My legs felt locked in place, my heart slamming against my ribs so hard I was sure she could hear it. "Human," she said, her voice low and vibrating through the room in a way that made the instruments on the shelves rattle. "Give me the child." "She's sleeping," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "I don't want to scare her." The Queen Mother took another step forward, and every soldier behind her tensed. Somewhere down the hall, I heard Callum's voice, tight with worry, telling someone to hold position, not to fire, not yet. "You would tell me," the Queen Mother said slowly, "what frightens my own blood." "No," I said. "I would just rather she wakes up calm than wakes up in the middle of soldiers shouting." For a long moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the quiet hum of the station and Vesh's soft, even breathing against my shoulder. The Queen Mother's black eyes moved from my face down to the child in my arms, studying her, searching for any sign of harm, any bruise, any wound. There was none. There had never been any. "Where is her mother?" the Queen Mother said, and this time her voice cracked slightly, just enough that I understood all at once what was really happening in this room. She was not just angry. She was terrified. She believed her granddaughter had been taken, and possibly that her own daughter was gone as well, and every soldier standing behind her was ready to act on that fear the moment she gave the word. "I don't know," I admitted. "She left Vesh with me during the evacuation meeting and never came back. I've been trying to find someone who knows what happened, but everyone's been too busy running from your ship." A voice crackled over my earpiece just then, faint but clear enough for me to hear. It was Callum again, and this time there was relief in his voice. "Nadia, the ambassador, been found. She was pulled into a secondary evacuation pod during the alert. She's alive, she's safe, she's on her way to the med bay right now." I almost laughed with relief, but I kept my voice calm because the Queen Mother was still watching me, still waiting. "Your daughter is alive," I told her. "She's coming here right now. She got separated during the evacuation, that's all. Nobody took anyone. I only stayed because Vesh was scared and alone, and I didn't think a child should be alone during something like this." The Queen Mother's antennae lowered slightly. A motion I would later learn was the Kelthan equivalent of a held breath finally released. She studied me for another long moment, then looked past me, toward the hallway, as if she could already sense her daughter approaching. And then something happened that I did not expect, something that made every soldier in that corridor go completely silent. The Queen Mother knelt. Not fully, not in submission, but low enough that her eyes were level with mine, low enough that the massive armored ruler of an entire hive species was suddenly no taller than I was. Her soldiers shifted uncomfortably behind her, clearly unused to seeing their monarch lower herself before anyone, let alone a human. "We were told your kind could not be trusted with anything fragile," she said quietly. "That you were too quick to anger, too quick to fight. I came here ready to believe that." "I know," I said. "I've heard that too." "And yet," she said, her eyes moving again to the sleeping child in my arms, "you held her through all of this. Through sirens, through soldiers, through the fear of my own arrival. You did not run. You did not hide her. You simply stayed." "She needed someone to stay," I said simply. "That's all it was." Before she could answer, hurried footsteps echoed down the corridor, and the ambassador appeared breathless, her uniform torn slightly at the shoulder from the evacuation. The moment she saw her mother kneeling and her daughter asleep in my arms, her whole body sagged with relief. "Mother," she said softly. The Queen Mother rose, turned, and reached for her daughter, pulling her into an embrace that seemed to release years of tension from both of them at once. Only then did Vesh finally stir, blinking awake against the sudden movement, confused by the bright lights and unfamiliar sounds around her. Her eyes found her grandmother first, and she reached for her instinctively. But then, just before I could step back, she turned and reached for me too, her small hand wrapping around my finger the way it had before she fell asleep. The Queen Mother watched this happen without a word, but something in her expression shifted, something that looked almost like understanding. "They warned me your species was dangerous," she said finally, straightening to her full height once more. "Perhaps they were right, but not in the way I expected." I frowned slightly, unsure what she meant. "You are dangerous," she said, "because it is impossible to hate you once we have seen what you do when no one is asking you to prove anything." She did not offer a treaty that day, no formal agreement, no signed document. But as she carried her granddaughter out of the med bay, glancing back at me once before the doors closed, I understood that something far more important had shifted in that small room. Not a war ended, not a war even fought. Just a single quiet act, one child asleep in unfamiliar arms, that had done more to earn trust between our two peoples than any negotiation ever could. And long after the sirens stopped and the soldiers withdrew, I stood there in the sudden silence, still feeling the small imprint of a hand that had once held on tight, and thinking that maybe this was how trust between strangers truly begins. Not with words, not with promises, but with someone simply choosing to stay.